Hi, I'm Billy Stewart, Assistant Pastor here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, 1325 Rudy Road in Alma, Arkansas. On behalf of Senior Pastors Harold Lee and Debbie Gilmore and the entire congregation of Solid Rock Tabernacle, I would like to welcome you to the broadcast and extend this personal invitation to you to come be with us in one of our exciting spirit filled services. Our Sunday school begins at 9 a.m., morning worship is at 10 a.m., and Sunday evening worship is at 6 p.m. We also have an exciting Wednesday evening Bible study at 7 p.m., where we are taking a journey through the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. I think you'll enjoy it. Join us, won't you? 1325 Rudy Road in Alma. We're church the way it should be, and we'll save a seat for you. Now, let's join our service already in progress. Huh? Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Numbers 25. Let's get into verses 1 and 3. Now, what remember where did we leave off last week? Before we get on, let's talk about where we left off last week. Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, he tried to Balak tried to get Balaam to curse Israel, and Balaam kept saying, "I'm just going to tell you what the Lord tells me." And uh, the Lord blessed Israel 3 times and winds up cursing Moab or Balak from Moab. So that's kind of where we left off. Now let's get into chapter 25, verses 1 to 3. And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. And they called the people unto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. So the women of Moab coming against the men, or coming among the men of Israel, seduce them into both sexual sin and also idolatry. Okay? Leave it to a woman to mess things up for them. Right. Hey, you know, it was a woman that ate us out of house and home in the garden, and now look what they're doing. So, no, I can say that. So because I can go home and I don't have to sleep on the couch. But yeah, uh-huh. So the two were commonly connected in perverse forms of idol worship, but the sexual immorality and the idolatry. Okay? And Israel's sin at Baal Peor was also carries a strong sense of ingratitude as well. God had just wonderfully protected Israel against the best efforts of Balaam and Balak to curse them, and instead blessing Israel and cursing their enemies. And their harlotry, both sexual and spiritual, was an ungrateful response. And in this chapter, the women and their people are sometimes described as Midianites. All right? Sometimes they're described as Moabites. Now, why is that? Well, this is because the Midianites were a nomadic group. They traveled around, they moved around quite a bit. All right, they were constantly going from place to place. And in this period of time, they were high in numbers among the Moabites. So the Midianites and the Moabites were all kind of joined together there. Okay? So Baal was the great Canaanite fertility god, is who it was. And worship of Baal was a constant temptation for the children of Israel. Balaam prophesied from the high place of Baal in Numbers 22:41, if you'll remember. And this is possibly the same place, Baal Peor, okay? And here Israel was joined to, it says, basically joined to, that is yoked together, partnered with, and they were joined together with the Canaanite god Baal, right? So to this point, in the whole story of Exodus, Israel has sinned in a lot of ways, right? You remember? Israel sinned quite a bit. What were some of the things they did? You remember? They murmured, they grumbled, they complained, oh, we're getting to eat, is this manna? We want meat, we want this, all this other stuff, okay? They're not being grateful to God's generous provisions that he has given. Basically, during all this time, they were worshiping Yahweh in a false way. Okay? Number one, first thing they did was claiming that a golden calf could represent him. Hello. They were claiming that a golden calf could represent God. Remember when Moses was up on the mountain and they made the golden calf? So basically they were making the golden calf in order to represent God. They sinned in their unbelief that God was going to do things for them. They refused to trust God and in his promises. But before this particular time here, they had never plainly worshiped another god. Now, the golden calf was just a symbol of God, of Yahweh. But now they were worshiping an entirely different God. So this was a sin of idolatry. Now, unlike any seen previously in the Exodus, this was bad. As bad as the sin was, as bad as the sins were in the past, this was worse than any of them they had ever done. Okay? And this is the first recorded incident of Israel with Baal. Okay? And it sets a tragic pattern for Israel's later dealings with that pagan deity. Okay? These women were enticing the people of Israel to idolatry. And they were doing it through sexual liaisons with pagan women. Right? Now, these temptations were such a powerful temptation that it even captured Solomon, if you remember. Okay? Israel's king, that he's famous for his wisdom, and we see later on type of thing. Okay? And it's not until Numbers 31:16 that we learn that this happened through the counsel of Balaam. It was Balaam that actually gave the counsel for this to happen. So in a sense, it was through Balaam's counsel that Baal worship first came to Israel. Balak could never have paid enough money to Balaam to make God curse Israel. Remember, he tried. He said, man, you give you a house of silver and gold. And he tried Israel. But Balaam said, I can only do what the Lord tells me. I can't do anything else other than what God tells me. And God never told him. to do it. God always cursed his enemies and blessed Israel. And in the previous chapter, Balaam tried to curse Israel and couldn't do it. He tried and tried and tried, but he couldn't do it. Instead, by the inspiration of the Lord, Balaam actually blessed Israel and cursed her enemies. Yet now they're at Baal Peor. They're in a different place. And Israel was cursed by having the anger of the Lord turned against them. Okay? Because, why? Because of their sin against the Lord. Okay? We learn later in this chapter that the anger of the Lord shows itself in a plague that began to strike down thousands among Israel. And it seemed like it was going to continue until the whole nation was consumed, which we'll see in just a little bit. What an enemy could never accomplish against Israel, Israel did to itself. Balak tried to get Balaam to curse him. The enemy tried to get a prophet to curse Israel, and he never could do it. Now, because Israel disobeyed, and through their disobedience and their idolatry and their harlotry, they cursed themselves. The same principle applies to Christians today when you think about it. Yeah. Anybody ever been attacked by Satan? Yeah, once or twice. Yeah. But think about it. The mightiest attack of Satan against us can never do as much damage as our own sin and rebellion against the Lord. Hey. No matter how bad Satan's attacks is, they're not anything compared to the damage that we can cause to ourselves through our own sin. Balaam did his best to curse Israel, but was unsuccessful. Yet his love for money wouldn't let the matter end without pleasing the man who hired him. He was going to do something. He had to please Balak because Balak was going to give him money. And that's who it was that hired him. Okay? And Balaam's greed motivated him to be persistent in finding a way to help Balak bring God's anger against Israel. Essentially, after his failure to curse Israel, Balaam said something like this to Balak probably. He says, I can't curse these people, but you can get them to curse themselves by luring them to rebel against their God. Okay? So send your most provocative girls among them and tell them to tempt the men of Israel to immorality and idolatry. So that's basically what he did, and it worked. Okay? Wouldn't let the matter end without pleasing the man. Okay. I don't know why I duplicated that side, but that side, okay. Balaam, through his wicked counsel to Balak, got what he wanted. Okay? But he also ended up dead among the enemies of God, so he only enjoyed those wages that he got for a very, very, very short time. All right, verses 4 and 5. The Lord said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. So, God, Yeah, at this time Moses is still alive. Yeah. Okay? So God thought that it was important that the offenders be judged openly because their sin was open. All right? Well, it's what it sounds like as they were hung. But let me explain what actually happened. This was not a sin that was to be kept hidden, and such open sin had to be dealt with openly. Okay? Considering the strong sense of disgrace associated with the unburied corpses that were there, This was a truly severe judgment. Now, as far as hanging them, here's what happened. Moses was told to round up all the tribal leaders, the leaders of all the tribes, all right? Those who presumably should have prevented the idolatrous acts, all right? Or carry out punishment of the guilty members of their tribe. And he told them to execute them. Now it says hanging, but what that means, the hanging on it, was they were to be impaled upon poles. All right? And they were impaled on these poles so that their bodies would hang out in the open in the broad daylight. All right? So responsibility was given to all the leaders of the people to find those who had committed the sins of idolatry and immorality with the Moabite would be death. Okay? The leaders, they got impaled. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen how they do the impalings on, you can find it on, the way that they used to do them. You can find it on different places on that. But they would basically start putting a large pole to where it comes up out of your mouth, from your backside all the way out your mouth, and you're there, and you don't die right away. You can actually, they had a way to do it to where they missed like the heart and the lungs and everything else, to where you wouldn't die immediately. And even though that pole's coming out your mouth, you can still breathe through your nose a little bit. So yeah, that would not be a nice way to die. Hey? Yeah. So that kind of tells you, that kind of tells you of how bad God thought this was, because that was a really rough way to kill somebody. But their penalty of anybody that was involved in the idolatry and the harlotry with these Moabite women, their punishment was to be death. Now, this was a severe judgment, but it is consistent with what God promised Israel in terms of the covenant that he made with them. Okay? When sin such as this is tolerated or even approved in a culture, it is a sure sign of decay. We're seeing that today. Not only is sin tolerated in this country and around the world, as far as that goes, it is celebrated in many ways. They have parades for it. They broadcast it on television. There's all of this stuff that goes on. It's celebrated. All in, we got to be diverse. No, we don't. It's encouraged. It's encouraged in a lot of schools. The schools now. Schools are the teachers are telling children in kindergarten and everything that oh no, yeah, you're a boy, but you're really a girl. And then they're not telling the parents about it. But they're encouraging people to do that. They're encouraging teachers to do that. And these teachers are pushing these highly susceptible young kids, I say kindergarten age kids, into doing this stuff, And I heard one not too long ago that they were a guy in I don't remember where it was exactly, but he had gone to a school board meeting and he was all upset about it. He was going off on them. And they said, well, he told his teacher that he identified as a girl. I said, okay. He said, the dad said, okay, that day, maybe so. But the day before, he identified as Spider-Man. Does that mean we're going to let him be Spider-Man? No. So I mean, kids have imaginations. They're gonna say, "Oh, I'm a dinosaur." Oh, well, are you gonna walk around and let them be a dinosaur? You know. So it's just and it's encouraged in a lot of ways, and it is celebrated in a lot of ways, and that brings decay to the country. Yes. Yeah, they're more susceptible to it. They're going to believe what people tell them. You know, you're an adult. You're supposed to be a trustworthy figure. I'm going to believe what you tell me. You know. All right. I know. I know. I know. But that I know. I mean, it upsets me. Even though I identify as wealthy, my credit card keeps getting declined. It says, you know, I don't get it. You know, my bank account does it. Yeah. You know, I think you're right, sister. It's wrong. We need to put a lawsuit out there and say, hey, I identify as wealthy. I should be wealthy. Uh, yeah, but the bank doesn't identify as that. So yeah, exactly. I am wealthy in the Lord. I am wealthy in the Lord. Okay. All right. Now, here, the Lord speaking through Moses would not accept this decay of the nation. And we should not accept the decay of the nation. We should, as I think I preached it Sunday night, that we need to be, we're the majority in this country. It's over 60, almost 70% of the nation claims to be Christian. Why are we letting the 1% or less than 1% rule everything and dictate everything? Why? Because they got big mouths. Okay. Speak out against it. You know why most Christians don't? Why do you think most Christians don't speak out? Yeah, they don't know how. They don't know where. They're afraid they're going to be made fun of. The big thing right now, is, everything is, if you do something, you're racist. Everything is racist. You're racist. What? You believe in God, you're racist. No, I'm not. You know. And it gets me. I was talking to somebody up in Fayetteville, and Fayetteville is getting to be pretty bad too. That Northwest Arkansas area, okay, because that's the major college is up there. But I was talking to somebody about it, and they said, about all this stuff, and um, they said, well, you're just homophobic. I said, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. I said, no. To have a phobia of something is a deep, intense fear. I ain't afraid of those people. I'm not in the least bit afraid of them. You know, I just think they're wrong. I don't think they're wrong. I know they're wrong. I'm not afraid of them. I'm afraid of where they're going to go, but I'm not afraid of them. Okay? So, it doesn't matter if they call you racist or they're gonna call you all kinds of names. But you know what? It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter what the world calls you as long as the Lord calls you blessed. That's it. As long as the Lord calls you one of His, it doesn't matter what the world says. Okay? So we need to be speaking up. We need to be speaking out against it. And there are some movements that are starting to come out. There are some things that are starting to happen. I've heard of some supposed revivals that were breaking out on some college campuses. One of them broke out because of they had a praise and worship band come in on that. But you have to be careful and look at what it is that they're actually celebrating, that they're actually preaching, that they're actually teaching, and they're actually singing about. Because not all Christian songs are Christian. just because they claim to be a Christian band or a praise and worship band does not mean that their music is praise and worship or that their music is Christian. You have to be very careful. It sounds nice. It'll move you. I hear a lot of songs. I've heard a lot of songs that really will move you to tears until you start listening to the lyrics and you go, wait, that doesn't line up with the Word of God at all. So how in the world, and so you have to be careful on what they're actually learning and what they're actually being taught on these things. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I'll probably get a lot of hate mail because of this, but I went into the bank. Went into the bank one day, and it was closed. And I'm like, it was, I guess it was a Friday, and the bank was closed. I'm like, why is the bank closed? And couldn't figure it out. And I said, well, maybe it was just Alma Bank. Maybe it's just the Alma branch that was closed. So I started heading to Van Buren. And I saw another bank that was closed. I'm like, why are the banks closed? I said, it's not a holiday, is it? And I looked it up, and it was Juneteenth. And I said, what is Juneteenth? I didn't even know what it was. Then when I looked it up, I'm like, why are we making this a national holiday? Anyway, but.
We thought it was a religious, going to be a religious thing. They had special speakers coming in that some of the ladies there at church knew that had been to their speeches or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them, and come to find out, well, yeah, they come and they were, but there was a group of, I'm sorry, and I'm not prejudiced, but there was a group of blacks that just overrun. And I was just thanking God that we were lucky to get all of our kids, get them to the band and get them.
Yeah. Well, and it it gets me on some of the.
I thought it was always set up when they started it as a religious holiday.
And it might have been, but they're not gonna make it a religious holiday for a federal holiday if it's religious. So they can't do that. But it's just there's a lot of stuff, and you got to be careful on these people. A lot of people. I'm not talking about a race of people, and I'm talking just some people that claim to be. There's one. Well, I'll say his name, Jesse Jackson. Jesse Jackson, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Well, Reverend of what? He never pastored a church anywhere. What is he? The Reverend? The man spent a week at the Playboy Mansion. I'm sorry. What is his religion? But anyway, I'm getting political again. I need to get off that. Okay. So God wouldn't accept this decay, but He commanded the community to bring the offenders to be judged. Okay. And He wanted to show that they would not accept this kind of sin in their midst. He wanted the people to stand up and say, hey, we're not going to accept this. We're not going to stand for this. All right? All right, verses 6 to 9. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel, and those that died in the plague were 24,000. Okay? Now, this particular one was an especially offensive example of the sin that was happening all around Israel. It was a man of Israel and a Midianite woman were together near the door of the tabernacle of the meeting. Now, some commentators actually say, and based on some of the older writings, Israeli Hebrew writings on this, that it actually means that they were actually engaging in sexual congress at the tabernacle of the meeting. Okay? So they were there at the tabernacle having sex. And Phinehas, who was one of those among Israel who would not accept this widespread rebellion against God. So he brought God's judgment by thrusting through the man of Israel and the Midianite woman with a spear. He stabbed them. He said, and it was supposedly while they were in the act. He went up there and just ran them through. Okay? So, in the presence of such a shocking and outrageous sin, it is common for onlookers to freeze in stunned disbelief. Have you ever seen something that was just so outrageous that you went, huh? And you couldn't do anything. You couldn't react. You're just like, what? It was just so outrageous. But one man did not remain motionless. Everybody else is seeing it and going, holy cow, I can't believe that. Am I really seeing this? But not Phinehas. He's like, Phinehas was the grandson of Aaron. Eh? He was the one man who acted boldly against this outrage. Okay? Now, Phinehas was not a vigilante. And his bold act, and God's praise of it, God did praise it, does not justify vigilantism. Right? Numbers chapters 3 and 4 explains that the priests were responsible for the security of the tabernacle. They were there to guard against intruders and killing those who dared trespass. Okay? Phinehas carried out this responsibility. Right? As an unauthorized protector of the tabernacle, and this was an outrageous attack against the holiness of the sanctuary. Okay? Phinehas was probably not the only one to make such a stand for righteousness, but what he did receive the credit for stopping the plague. Okay? Now, it's easy to think that the stand for righteousness made by one person makes no difference in the massive presence of sin in a community. But God can honor just one righteous act and cause it to make a difference. Okay? Take, for example, Jesus. That one righteous act that Jesus did made a difference for the entire world throughout history. Now, 24,000, that's how many died in the plague. 24,000. Now, Balak, he was probably giddy over this, all right? Okay? And he basically knew that Balaam had succeeded in cursing Israel, or rather, in getting them to curse themselves. All right? All right, verses 10 to 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, had turned my wrath away from the children of Israel, while he was zealous for my sake among them, that I consume not the children of Israel in my jealousy. Wherefore say I, behold, I give unto him my covenant of peace, and he shall have it, and his seed after him, even the covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and made an atonement for the children of Israel. Okay? So it wasn't only that Phinehas' obedience to God was noticed, it was also that he was zealous with God's zeal. Okay? Very enthusiastic. Okay? Phinehas was passionate about the things that God was passionate about. And in this situation, Phinehas faithfully demonstrated the zeal of God against Israel's unfaithfulness to their covenant with God. And God blessed Phinehas with the promise that he would be the descendant of Aaron through whom the priesthood passed. It would go through him. And this was fitting because it was the zeal of Phinehas that made atonement for the children of Israel. All right, verses 14 to 18. Now the name of the Israelite that was slain, even that was slain with the Midianitish woman, was Zimri, the son of Salu, the prince of a chief house among the Simonites. And the name of the Midianitish woman that was slain was Cosbi, the daughter of Zur. He was head over a people and the chief house in Midian. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Vex the Midianites and smite them. For they vex you with their wives, whereby they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a prince of Midian, their sister, which was slain in the day of the plague for Peor's sake. Okay? So the names of these two people that were slain by Phinehas weren't previously mentioned. They were unnamed. So the naming was not for, it was basically for their everlasting shame. It was to bring shame on them and their families forever. Okay? Both of them came from fathers who were leaders. And in Israel, only men could be priests. Right? You remember that? We talked about that? Only the men could be priests. But for the people in surrounding areas, women were also often priests. Okay? And their priestly service that they provided was often associated with prostitution. Okay? So they were holy prostitutes. Right? God commanded Israel to show no tolerance toward the Midianites, who played a role in seducing Israel to the sins of immorality and idolatry. Israel was commanded to battle against the Midianites at every opportunity they had. You get a chance, fight them. Yes. I don't know. I guess it's possible, but they probably did it just for the sake of doing it. Okay? Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. As was common with other peoples, the Moabites, the Midianites, and several other people in those regions, it wasn't unusual for women to be priests, but their priestly service was basically prostitution, is what it was. All right? And God told them to fight against the Midianites at every opportunity they had, every chance they got. Right? When I was in high school, I'm going to tell you this little story. When I was in high school, there was a bully that was there. And he beat me up a couple of times. Right? He was just a big bully. And so finally, I got tired one day. I said, I'm so tired of this guy coming and doing all this stuff. So every chance I got, every time I saw him, I would go out of my way to fight him. Every chance I got. He could be walking on the sidewalk across the street, and I'd run over and start fighting him. Every time I saw him, I'd go over and start fighting him. Now, he beat me every time, of course, but it got to the point that every time he saw me, he goes, this guy's crazy. I'm tired of fighting with this guy. And he would get out of the way. It took a little while, but he quit messing with me, And that was, and basically God's telling Israel, fight the Midianites every chance you get. If you see them, go fight them, I don't care if they're on the other side of the river, go fight them. You find them, go fight them, all right? Who taught me to do that? Nobody. I just came up with it on my own. Yeah, I'm pretty smart. Or stupid. It depends on how you want to look at it. Numbers 31, 1 to 20 records that 12,000 Israelites attacked the Midianites, destroyed all their cities, slew their 5 kings, every grown woman, and took all their spoils. All right? With the plague of Baal Peor, the punishment of the first generation was complete. It was done. And the process of preparing the second generation to enter the promised land was at hand. And that's where we're going to leave off today. See, we almost got through a full hour with it. So. They had 5 kings, yeah. Oh, I'm sure they were all spread out over different areas, yeah, but they had 5 kings.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray you were blessed by the broadcast. If you have a prayer request or questions about Solid Rock Tabernacle, please visit our website at www.solidrocktabernacle.org. That's www.solidrocktabernacle.org. On behalf of the pastors and congregation here at Solid Rock Tabernacle, we pray you have a blessed week, and we invite you to join us in person or on one of our future broadcasts.